Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave. We're hoping you'll let us know where you think we got it right and where we've totally missed the point, which you can do by visiting unsilentpodcast.com. Now let's get into it for the day. What should we talk about, Brian?
Well, I think this week we should explain to the people in the future what it's like to go through this period of time where the emphasis has changed, certainly over the last decade, but in my adult lifetime, it's changed from focusing on a better me versus focusing on a better we. So, for example, when I was growing up, there was no shortage of people who listened to self-improvement tapes. There's a guy named Tony Robbins. I don't know if he'll be known as a guy in the year 2090 or not, but pretty big deal. Is early 10 years ago, made a lot of money, of course, but had a lot of influence and was helping people be better. And all through school, and then especially early on in my younger days, when my career first got going, if you wanted to get ahead in life, you had to become a better person. You had to learn skills that paid more. You had to learn skills that garnered you more abilities and maybe more influence and things like that. And now there's definitely a shift where the focus feels to me as it's not so much on making a better me as it is making a better society. So I don't have to worry about all those things. Does that feel accurate to you, Dave?
Oh, I'm sure that's the case. I witness that every day. The lack of interest in self-improvement now versus the focus on any issues I've got that in the past I might have looked at from a self-improvement perspective are now whose fault is that? It's society's fault. It's not my fault. So it's a mammoth shift. It's a huge shift.
Yeah, and for people listening again who might live in the year 2080 or 2090, who are wondering what we're talking about, like as I was coming up, it was a very common thing for parents, friends' parents, teachers, counselors, anyone who had authority over a child to basically say 95% of your problems are your own doing.
Sure.
Like if there's a problem in your life, there's a 95% chance it's something you're doing to causing it. And even if that's not true, there's a 95% chance you're making it worse.
Right.
And that was just kind of the predicate for all things learning.
Yeah. And today, if you even ask that, or if you frame it that way, if you frame it to what are you going to do about this problem you've got? Well, are you saying that what are you saying about me? This is a broader societal issue. Society's to blame. So if you frame it that way today, in a lot of cases, and maybe in most cases, you're thought about very poorly.
Right. And I don't think I can understate the shift here. I don't think I can understate the change in just how people who are driving society, I guess. The younger people now call them influencers, the TikTok people or whatever. They're influencers. We didn't have influencers when I was growing up. We just had people in charge and people who knew more stuff than me, which was everyone when I was young, right? But the idea that somebody would have told a 14 or 19-year-old Brian, hey, there's these things happening, but listen, don't worry about you trying to get through it better. You need to put your energy in figuring out how to make society fix this. That would have been like a ludicrous idea. And I'm sure I'm like caricaturizing what is said now. It's probably not quite like that. But the statements very much were, yeah, so what? Yeah, so you got handed this crappy situation. So what are you going to do about it? Yeah, so life isn't fair. Like sometimes people have advantages. People are born into wealthy families. Some people are not. People are born with great physical skill or athletic skill. Some people are not. Some people are great at chess. Some people are not. Like, so what? So my role, your role, Brian, young Brian, is to make the best of it. And now we need to actively level the playing field so people don't have to feel that inadequacy. They don't have to feel poorly or shame for not taking care of things they can. And really all the emphasis put on how it's, again, I'm going to caricaturize this. I don't mean to as much as it's going to sound probably, but how it's somebody else's fault and how we can fix them.
Yeah, that's right. And I think what we have today, even if you look at the kinds of organizations that people join today, like you look at college campuses and the types of organizations that exist on college campuses today. When I was growing up as a young business person, or even in college, a lot of people were joining Toastmasters to learn how to speak better, and there were fraternal organizations. They still exist today, but they're much smaller. Who they focused on higher ideals and higher values. But now a lot of the organizations that are attracting, for instance, youth attention are grievance organizations, are organizations that are essentially there to make you feel better about yourself by not accepting that you're the captain of your own ship. Now, yes, so there's societal things, just like you're saying. There's societal things that are happening. There's unfairnesses that are happening. There are certainly things that happen that are not right, but we're not promised equity, to use the term that we have today. That's a very popular term. We're not promised equal outcomes. We're promised a playing field in which we can go out and strive to be our best, to achieve the best outcome that we can have, regardless of other people, regardless of who's done better than me, regardless of who's richer or better looking or whatever else. So there's less focus on self and more focus on what's wrong with society that prevents me from being who I really deserve to be.
Right. And my argument for supporting that is, my own story, which is I not educated. I didn't go to school beyond high school. I didn't have any skills to speak of when I came out, but I was willing to learn. I was willing to listen to people smarter than me. And they taught me a bunch of really cool things that helped me go on to become a business owner multiple times, multiple businesses that were successful, and get myself out of an economic cast, I guess, or whatever, into a much different place economically, and just life happiness and fulfillment and purpose and all kinds of things. And it seems to me, again, with my old school, born in 1974 thinking, that if we shift to fixing society, somebody has to decide who gets to be successful and who does not. Is there
right?
Is there anything I'm missing with that? That's kind of what it feels like to me. Is if the impetus is put on making society better, somebody has to govern that. Somebody has to have their thumb on the scale, one way or the other, and basically has to determine this person based on all these data inputs we're considering. This person needs more advantage than that person. So an exterior force gets to decide who gets to be successful and who doesn't. And that would have been soul crushing for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think if you think about it a little deeply, you think about it cynically, then you have to ask, why is that? Why has that happened? Why has that occurred? And for our future friend, for Kenny G in the future, what should he look out for to see when this same kind of shift that you're talking about between when we were young and today happens again? So why does that happen, and how to watch out for that, and what are the telltale signs? And it seems to me that one of the sort of the cynical viewpoints on that is that it's much easier to organize and fundraise and gain power with a bunch of disgruntled people than it is people that you've told you can make yourself better without me, without my political party, without my grievance group, without my protest march, without whatever it is that is sort of the dominant news cycle thing that everybody should be mad about. There's that bumper sticker some years ago, and it wasn't recently. It was probably 20 years ago. It said something like, "If you're not outraged, you're not paying attention." You remember that?
Right.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so on one hand, it's like, okay, I get that you're upset, but my question is, then what are you going to do about it as an individual to improve your little local community around you? If there are inequalities, and again, I would say if there are inequalities, I wouldn't use the term inequities, because there's always going to be inequities. If there's inequalities, then what can I do with the skill set that I have, the resources that I have, which are limited, to move it incrementally a little bit? It seems to me that is how you're going to improve a society a lot more than than the outrage culture that currently dominates our whole society right now.
Right. And I would argue that just as you could have that bumper sticker, you could have one that says, if you're not feeling gratitude, you're not paying attention.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, especially in America.
That wouldn't sell very often, probably.
Oh, you'd probably get your car egged because it's like,
yeah.
Well, and isn't that really the danger of that attitude? Isn't that the danger? Because if you look at anybody today, you look out my window here in the middle of Tacoma, Washington in 2023, and there's all manner of cars that go by. There's beaters that are beat down, and there's people walking that aren't don't have the best things in life. But you know what? For the most part, pretty much everybody around me would be considered a magician and a king, or the amount of stuff and things we have and the abilities we have compared to a couple of centuries ago. Cell phones, you're thousands of miles, you're 1,500 miles or something like that away from me right now. And we're talking, and there's no delay as if you were sitting right next to me. We've got within earshot, or within a few miles from here, I can get any sort of coffee that's ever been produced on planet Earth.
Right.
I mean, so if you're not, that attitude of gratitude you're talking about, if you're not grateful in this era right now, one, we poison our lives because we're focusing only on the negative. And, there's limited time. Focus on the negative, focus on the positive. It's your own choice. And number two, we poison the culture from actually helping people advance. Because that whole idea, to me, that it's society's problem means it's too big for me, which means it's hopeless. And hopeless people do not solve problems. Hopeless people do not overcome obstacles. It's only people with hope that overcome obstacles. And I'll start preaching if I'm not careful.
Yeah. So if this movement that we're experiencing now continues, and this is not a pendulum so much, but a linear movement, and the way that you and I grew up in this ideal, it became cliche, but it wasn't cliche for a while. And that was the thought that you as an individual can be anything you want to be. And people meant that sincerely and genuinely and earnestly. And it became a cliche thing, like, oh, of course, anybody can become the president. Like, it kind of became a goofy thing. But when I was young, by and large, people meant that. And by and large, it was true. Again, there's no shortage. If you do any kind of research at all, if you go listen to any kind of motivational speaker, which I know is a completely passé thing now, but there's no shortage of stories of people. Like, I remember hearing one when I was in my early 20s about a guy who sold cars, and he was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. Sure. And his whole thing was he would have people fill out the contract to buy the car back when you did everything in writing. He would say, hey, I just need your name. Could you put it here? And I need your income. Can you put it here? And meanwhile, they'd be filling out the entire contract, and all they had to do was sign the thing at the end, and they bought the car because he couldn't read or write. So they had to do it. So he was super creative. And there's tons of stories like this of how people overcame adversity, like in just super impressive and inspiring ways. And it felt like there was hope, and it felt like I could be something. There was a reason to excel. There was a reason to go out and try and fail. And how would you explain to Kenny G, if this is a linear movement, what that was like for you to have that opportunity, and how sad it would be from your perspective, having had that, for people to no longer have it?
Well, I mean, if you think about it from my perspective, because I wasn't born into wealth. My dad was born the year the Great Depression started. My mom was born 2 years before the Great Depression started. So, even though my mom went to college a little bit, she didn't finish college. My dad did maintenance work his entire life. I had a fine life. Didn't have any hardship that I was aware of. Now, today, people would say I had hardship, but I didn't have any hardship that I was aware of. But I always thought that whatever I wanted to accomplish, my parents instilled in me, whatever I wanted to accomplish, I could. So as a result of that, I have lived a better life. Not that I'm 100% failure free, because got plenty of that in the past too. And that's of course the danger of living a life that the self-help books tell you to live. And that is that you're going to fail along the way, and that you're going to, not be able to achieve everything the first go around, probably, and that's okay. So the question would be, like for me, if I had one time out and I experienced failure, then if I believed the dominant narrative of today, then I wouldn't have started again. I wouldn't have got up again. When I started a business that I had to close in a couple of years when I was 21, because I didn't know I shouldn't start a business. Why not? Let's go for it.
Right.
I probably wouldn't have started again. I probably wouldn't have gotten up again. So, the danger of the hopeless and the you can't do it attitude is, well, again, cliches. The self-help books have got lots of things that people call cliches, but I believe they're true. So if I say I can, or if I say I can't, I'm most likely right.
Yeah.
If I determine that society is against me, and that the obstacles are too great, and that there is whatever's against me, whether it's because I'm old or bald or whatever it happens to be, or maybe other people might say their skin color or their gender or their nationality or whatever. If you determine that is such a hindrance, and there can be hindrances there, but if you determine that that's such a hindrance that you're not going to get up and try, then you have locked in failure. You've locked in hopelessness, and that's a thing that if hopelessness gets widespread in a society, that's when I think you see societal collapse. If people have an optimistic view.
If I understand correctly, and I may not, and of course, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think that what people would say is that, yeah, but you're hopeless about what you can do, but think of the possibilities a society could do when everybody thinks like this and everybody's trying to make society better, and they're willing to sacrifice themselves and their own personal wishes and goals and hopes and dreams in payment for essentially the greater societal good. Is that an accurate way of saying what they would come back with?
I think that's halfway there. I think there's two things. I think one of them is that it's a lot easier to be hopeless and angry. So it's a lot, if I challenge myself to grow, that's hard. You've started a business.
Yeah.
I've started multiple businesses. That's hard. It's a challenge. It's some days you feel like you're totally alone. So that's difficult. It's much easier to say that I'm just not going to do it because society's against me. So, and human nature, is the path of least resistance, right?
I think that's a key thing to really emphasize here is what you just said, which is our innate nature is to take the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
To have the opportunity that Dave and I grew up believing we had takes an immense amount of work to get going. Once you get going, like you're going. Like it's not like it's impossible every day. I couldn't have done it if it was impossible every day.
Right.
But it does take a lot of effort to get the momentum going, because our natural place is to want to be taken care of and not have to do a whole lot of stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's why this hopelessness and this society's to blame attitude that's one of the two reasons I think it's so popular. The other one is because it makes us feel better about ourselves. Because, I have not achieved, I'm not a billionaire. I don't have a private jet. Whatever people think of success, I don't have those things. Now I feel blessed. I feel happy. I feel fortunate in my life. But I don't have those things that would classify me as a Forbes front page success. Now, I could say that is society's fault, and I really should have those things. If life were fair, I really should have those things, and it's not my fault that I don't have those things. Well, in reality, if I would have maybe have been smarter, maybe if I would have worked harder, maybe if I would have been willing to sacrifice more, maybe I could have achieved those things. Maybe I could have. I don't know. But I don't need to. I'm not going to pawn off on the overall society just to feel better about myself, to think, say what you will about him, Elon Musk has done really, really well. Okay. Whatever you say about Elon Musk or a lot of these guys, they've done very well. Whether I agree with them or not and everything, that's a whole different story. But say that I don't have what they have. Is that my fault, or is that their fault, or is that society's fault? If I feel bad about myself, and I don't feel bad about myself that I don't have what Musk has. I don't feel bad about myself. So that's another thing. So it's a way to help ourselves feel better about ourselves without demanding something from ourselves. And then the flip side of that is if you get a bunch of hopeless people and a bunch of people that aren't demanding much of themselves, then it's very easy for a fundraiser, a community organizer, a politician, a guru of some sort to get you all riled up and get everybody to give them $1. They get rich, they get famous, they get powerful. So it's all of those, it's the train wreck, right? The car wreck. Human beings have this, we're drawn to tragedy and to disaster and to, all those kinds of things. So there's an appeal there. It's a weird thing about human culture, but there is an appeal there. We get drawn to those things, and cynical, maybe bad people will use those things for their own selfish benefit. So I think you pile all those things on top of one another, and that's what you have. That's why we're here today. And it's unfortunate because it means that a lot of people are not living as fulfilled a life as they could.
Yeah, I think one of the things that says to me what you're talking about there is it's almost as if, and I'm not sure if this is a byproduct, if this is a feature or a bug, I'm not sure. But it's almost like we remove becoming a billionaire is not a goal you should even have. So you shouldn't aim for that. Like, not only can't you because the cards are stacked against you, but that's not even a good goal, or
right.
a good, like, having material wealth and things like that. That's not even something you should aim for, because people way smarter, more righteous than me will decide who has contributed enough to society to earn that kind of thing. If my number's called, then otherwise I just need to go to work at the factory and do what I'm told. But
right.
It seems like it's just as simple almost as removing that as being a goal that's looked upon as okay to have.
Well, you're right. In fact, we not only say that it's not okay to have that as a goal, we say if they have that, whoever it is, whether the billionaire or the millionaire or billionaire class, whoever those people are, we won't talk. We won't talk about that guy. Anyway, the position of being one of those things automatically in many people's minds makes you a bad person, because you couldn't have gotten there without exploiting or hurting some other person or people en masse, right? And so therefore those people are not role models. When I grew up, the people that were titans in industry and had achieved great things, and I think of like Lee Iacocca, and there's everybody's flawed human beings, but you think these people have accomplished these wonderful business success and other successes in life, and they were looked at as role models. And man, if I could learn something about what he or she has done, maybe I could achieve some of that kind of success that they've done. Now it's like, look at the success that this person or that person has. The only way they could have gotten it is by doing evil things and stealing from other people. And so therefore achievement
do you think that's true? Like, I look at Mark Zuckerberg, who I think is like the 6th or something richest person in the world. Yeah. He's in the top 10, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I don't hear anybody talking about him being an evil person. Now, there's people who have heard his story and he supposedly stole the idea. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm saying the people who would say that Lee Iacocca was a bad guy, the people who would say that Rockefeller was a bad guy, I don't hear them saying that, that Elon Musk is a bad guy. Yeah. I don't hear them saying Zuckerberg's a bad guy. I don't hear him saying Oprah's a bad person. I don't hear him saying Obama's a bad person for having wealth. Why do you think that is? Is it just the tribalism that kicks in?
Well, yeah, I do think it's the tribalism. And I think as we've talked about in other episodes, that we excuse the people who are in our ideological tribe from the same kinds of scrutiny and same kinds of judgment that we put on other tribes and other people. So I do think that's the case. So you'll hear most of the ire directed against people either that are non-committed, so therefore they're easy to attack because they're not a part of the left or the right, or the people that are part of the opposite tribe that are very successful, and as a result they must have stolen it because they're bad people to begin with. But there's also a whole, there is this this discussion in society of the millionaire and the billionaire class, the 1%, all of these and they're as a general class, even if you take out, one person who's a millionaire or a billionaire and say they're okay and this person isn't, even if you take that out, the classes there, those upper income classes, are generally looked at as being as getting there through corrupt means. And the reason we do that is because there's such a gulf between, not we as in us, but we as in society. There's such a gulf between our achievement and earning and their achievement and earning that we say, well, how do we explain this gulf? It can't be because of me. It can't be because I didn't do everything possible. It can't be because I didn't, get up a little bit earlier. It can't be because I didn't have that driven attitude that a lot of these people have. I've worked with, I've met a number of millionaires and a few billionaires, not many. But in these people that I've met that have achieved incredible success, most of these people, if not all of them, have sacrificed a great deal, have worked their tails off, have sometimes had to sacrifice pretty much personal lives. There's
their kids don't know them. Their kids were raised by a nanny or whatever, or exactly. Don't like them or whatever.
So they've paid the price for their success, but that doesn't make them an evil person, or that doesn't mean that success as a category makes people or is evil. So that's one of the big shifts that I see between when we were young and today, and that was there were a lot of people in that upper end class or upper income class and success in business and such that were, what can I do to achieve that, to get close to that, versus now, I don't want to get close to that because one, it takes personal sacrifice on my part, and two, they must be evil because they're different than me.
Yeah, I think that this is a spot where two things can be true at once. It was an episode or two ago, you and I were talking about, when corporations get too much power, how that really does become a bad thing, and they do really begin to abuse people and things like that.
You bet.
And so I'm kind of of the mind that we should support personal growth and development right up until the moment where they have a monopoly over things and they begin abusing people, and then I want them to come crashing down, right? And I don't know what the number is for that, if it's 7.2 billion, or if it's 1.3 billion, or 112 billion. I don't know when that happens, but somewhere around there they get enough influence, and they get corporate power that is different from personal achievement.
Yes.
And whenever that bridge is crossed, I'm now rooting against them instead of for them. But it feels to me like we focus on the people who have crossed that bridge into attaining this corporate power, those billionaires and millionaires. We use those people as the avatar for all the ones who have not done that yet. And who are still just have amassed substantial wealth, whether it be millions, tens, or hundreds of millions of dollars, but don't have that kind of corporate power that really abuses people. They've just done really well. And it seems like we use the Borg-ish kind of avatar to represent all those, when really the people, the billionaires who have kind of crossed that bridge, maybe number 1,500, 2,000 in the world, maybe. I don't know. I don't know the number, but there's probably tens of thousands of people who have made $100 million and who haven't done that corruptive kind of cruel, abusive kind of thing. They get lumped in for whatever reason. How do you reconcile that?
Well, so one, they get lumped in because of envy, because I don't think most people, and probably myself included, understands the life of a billionaire. I mean, like I'd
give it a shot for 6 months.
Well, sure. I mean, if there's a chance to try it for a little bit, I'll give it a shot. But I don't think most people understand it well enough to know whether they are doing good or whether they are doing bad. I think, but the reason that there's this level of societal blame is because of envy and because of, maybe laziness. I could achieve more with my life, but no, I can't because society's unfair and Elon Musk is stealing all my money.
Elon Musk is holding me down. Yeah.
Elon Musk is holding me down. But also, I want to also get back to what you just said a minute ago. When does that kind of what does it cross over between personal achievement and corruption? And it seems to me there's two basic places that happens. It's one, when it stops being you're competing on an even playing field in a fair way with other people. You're using government bureaucracy and unfair advantage that you have not gained by just providing a better product, and people are buying that better product. So you're using government connections to shut out your competition. Okay, you start to lose my respect at that point. You start to lose my respect. And on the flip side of that, when you are you can also achieve, it doesn't happen all that often, but if you achieve a natural monopoly and you've got 80% of the market and you've done it, legitimately, but you use that natural monopoly to buy up and destroy your competitors, then at that point, I think you've crossed the line as well. And there is a legitimate, we talked about this before, there is a legitimate role of society and government to say, no, you are really too big. We don't begrudge you the fact that you made a lot of money, but now you're crossing into the place where you're hurting other people because of that. So, I think those two things are true.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing you say, and I guess the way I would, having not really thought this through, so forgive me for having an incomplete thought here, but it seems to me like people who could become wealthy by serving their clients, I'm all for. Like they're providing a better product, a better price, better service, and they get what they get by making other people's lives better.
Yes.
And when that shifts to now it's time to make my life better, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to do that, whether it be the corruption, buying up competitors so the customers have less options, and they're just stuck with my thing. If I could read minds, I would say when it becomes about serving themselves, I don't support them. When it's about serving the client, even though they get wealthy in the process, I'm all for it.
Yes.
I would have to think through how it's evidenced. I'm sure the two things you mentioned are 100% accurate. It'd be nice for me if I could figure out the other ways that would be evidence that could be like proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's probably not a reasonable thing to hope for. So Dave, you mentioned the people, if this is a linear movement and the people 60 years from now have less freedom than we have now, which I don't really see how that trend would change. Like the income tax came about in the 1870s or something like that, 1880s, somewhere in there. We didn't have an income tax before that. If you just look at the things that we have to have licenses for now that we didn't have to have 120 years ago, fishing licenses, driver,
right.
Like you can't collect rainwater off your roof now. That's now not deemed your property. If it lands on it is like, okay, so forget this little 15-year era me and you were talking about. If you just look at go back to 1800 and look at, like, forget the technology piece, but just look at the freedoms we had then versus the freedoms we have, it's substantially fewer.
Sure.
That trend I don't think would be changing a whole lot. So we talked about the things that you and I would be sad for us that the people living 60 years from now would not have that we have, which is mostly opportunity and the ability to dream big and fail on our own merits.
Right.
And even though there's things holding us back, I don't have great athletic ability. I'm not a gifted speaker. A lot of things you mentioned, I'm certainly not gifted at. But I was able to do what I think is pretty well given that. And you and I literally were just joking about, billionaires and laughing. Oh, I'd be a billionaire for a day, but it's not an envy thing. It's
no.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool. But you know what? I'm just as grateful with what I have because that's okay. So we talked about like what it would be. It's sad for those people not to have. Now let's flip it and say they have this again. They have what you and I have again. What would you tell them to look out for that would be indications the rug could be yanked at any moment?
Well, so certainly this goes back to a previous episode too. The concentration of vast power in a very small pocket of force-based institutions. By force-based institutions, I mean, either regulatory institutions, et cetera, because those are the ones, the corruption of multi-billionaires, for instance, a lot of that couldn't exist unless there was government force behind it. So I would be watching for that. I would be watching for the corruption that happens when that happens. When you have and government, at the end of the day, government is just a gun. It's a person with a gun. Government's nothing more than that. If I decide that I don't want to hire Brian, I don't hire Brian. Nobody comes at me with a gun. If I decide I don't want to engage in the most recent thing that XYZ agency comes out with at the federal level or at the state level, then somebody with a gun, ultimately, it goes 2 or 3 times down the road. I get letters first and other things like that. Maybe lawyers contact me. But eventually somebody shows up with a gun.
Not so nice letter, then a warning, and then a gun.
And then somebody shows up with a gun. So government is forced. And so, when the society reaches the point that that these things are enforced at the point of a gun, or I will say it this way too. Another way to say it is when companies are essentially controlled by a central authority, aka you can't say this. Tell all the companies from the central authority, you can't say this thing because we don't approve. Again, it's basically force. At that point, you've reached a society that no longer gives an individual the opportunity to achieve what you and I have achieved in whatever modest growth we've had in our lives. So I think that's a huge part of it. I think a huge part of it is the freedom to go out, to try and fail, and to try again, and to try again, and to try again. What I've done my entire life, from the time I started selling seeds and, picking up cans from all the drunk people on Sunday and recycling them when I was a kid, all the kinds of things that I did to make money. When it becomes an illegitimate exercise.
I would say that when what was that?
It becomes an illegitimate exercise when you can no longer do these kinds of things, when you are forced to endure that.
I would say also the point in which we stop recognizing. So just take me again. I'm not gifted, no college. I've done reasonably well in life. The number of people who started out with worse circumstances than me and have vastly greater circumstances than me is in the tens or hundreds of thousands.
Sure. Yeah.
And they have what others might consider limitations that I don't. Again, you mentioned like race and gender and physical disability and things like that. And there's people who don't have those things that other folks would consider liabilities, not assets, right?
Right.
I don't believe that, but there's plenty of people out there who do. And whether or not they have those things or not, the number of people who started out worse than me in life and have done far better than me is off the charts. There's tens or hundreds of thousands of those people. The difference is how much work we put in, how much dedication, how much focus. It's the things, right?
Right.
We stopped realizing that is kind of when it feels like it shifted for me. Like it became like we weren't even allowed to say that what I just said is true because it can't be true because you're a straight white dude and therefore you have all this stuff handed to you. And I'm like, well, wait a second. What about the people who started with worse than me and are doing much better than me? What about those folks who again number in the tens or hundreds of thousands? When that conversation is not allowed anymore, that tells me like something's wrong.
Absolutely.
Because that's a plainly obvious statement.
Well,
the last thing I want to ask you, this is kind of something I want to throw at you. This is something I've been kind of tossing around. When I grew up watching TV, I would watch Westerns a lot. Like one of my favorite movies is Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie.
Oh yeah.
Outlaw Josie Wales, John Wayne. Like that was I still love Westerns. But when I was a kid, I really liked Westerns. And a common theme, whether it was a TV show, like you mentioned Gunsmoke before we got on the air here today, and the Rifleman and things like that. A common theme was the lessons being taught, and I won't step on your point because I know you're going to talk about that, but there was oftentimes a scene where the sheriff was holding a person who was accused of a crime in the jail cell, and it's a dark night, and there's nobody there but the prisoner and the sheriff, and then the posse rolls up, and there's 15 or 20 guys, and they're hooping and hollering and shooting their guns off, and they're drunk and whatever, and we're coming in there after him, whether you like it or not. And he stands on the porch of the jail and says, if you're coming in, you're going through me first. And oh, by the way, Johnny, you're dying first, that kind of thing. And he would stand up to the crowd. And the moral was, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you got to do what's right.
Right.
And doing what's right is protecting a person to go through, in this case, due process, even though they're probably guilty. They probably did steal the horse. He deserves his day in court. He deserves his fair trial, whatever, right? I remember growing up thinking, I hope when I'm old enough, I have the courage to do that.
Right.
And now it seems to me as a 49-year-old guy watching how decisions are being made and what makes a person in with society versus out. So that would make a person in the society when I was younger. Like if you had the courage to stand up to the crowd, that was good. You were
right.
You were seen as moral and whatever. It feels to me like now a 5-year-old kid or a 10, maybe 12-year-old kid would watch that and say, I hope I would have the ability to overlook that guy pleading for his life and join the posse.
Right.
Am I lost my mind, or does that kind of feel like it's the way it is to you too? Am I really exaggerating that? Or does that feel like how it is?
Oh, no, not at all. I remember all those old shows that we were talking about, the Bonanza and the Rifleman, and I love the Rifleman show because at the end of every one of them, the son's like, "But Dad, this person did this. Shouldn't we?"
Pa, not Dad. Pa. How dare you?
That's
Come
right.
on.
Pa. That's right. It was Pa. It was Pa. Yeah, Chuck Connors, the Rifleman. What a great show.
Chuck Connors, that's right.
And at the end of the show, it's like, son, even though we might feel like doing this, even though we need to overcome our own personal desires in this and do the right thing. Now, we're at 180 degrees now because it's like now this person it looks wrong. Maybe they're part of the wrong class. They're part of the wrong group. And even though they've not done anything wrong, they're still guilty. So we have to overcome the fact that we know they're not guilty because of their own personal actions, but they're guilty because of their ancestors, because of their skin color, because of their gender, because of their affiliate, whatever it is. And so now we're 180 degrees opposite. Now the moral thing to do is to let's burn down this neighborhood because society's unfair. So it's we're attacking society at the expense of personal morality, personal responsibility. 180 degrees opposite of the way all our old favorite shows used to behave.
Right. So we have to, instead of having to overcome our own fear and our own fear of death and fear of being displaced from society, whatever, to stand up to this mob, and the guy leading the posse was the guy who was the land baron who had the 100 acres or whatever. So you're standing up to big power to do the right thing by this person. And now it's like, well, we have to overlook we have to overcome our compassion for these people who will be hurt by doing this thing to join the mob. And that's the part that for me really stands out. Like we have to overlook how horrible this is going to be for the neighbor, the person who owns the house or business that gets burned down. That's just the way it is because the posse needs to burn the thing down to do their thing. And we have to stop feeling compassion for that person to join the mob, which feels like going back to 1943 Mississippi to me. Like
Absolutely.
It feels like we've completely regressed, and like all the lessons that were seemingly taught and or learned through the 50s and 60s and 70s, like it seems like all that stuff's been erased in the last 15 years. Does it feel that way for you too?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was growing up, and the society tried to restrain itself from, for instance, taking revenge. Now, revenge is a great societal value if you're getting your revenge against the people whose ancestors hurt you. Or hurt your ancestors. So,
or hurt some people who whose ancestors maybe,
or whose maybe ancestors
not,
look
or
like
we're
you,
distant cousins to, or something.
Exactly,
but they look like, and that's close enough.
Yeah, exactly. So we've traded noble emotions to a great extent for more base emotions. We've traded self-sacrifice, and we've traded compassion. We've traded for envy, and they only have what they have because they robbed me from it. I should have that. I'm going to get it by force. We've traded compassion and forgiveness for revenge and for anger. So, and a society, again, talking to the future, talking to Kenny G, when a society begins to trade in the noble emotions of compassion and forgiveness and understanding and self-sacrifice, when we start trading those things in, and we start adopting endurance and all of that, then we're at a point where we have a real problem. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I agree. All right, just for those of you listening, if you're wondering who Kenny G is Kenny in Generation Gamma, which is, as we look through the upcoming generation names, Gamma is in a few. He'll be born in around the year 2040, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. So that's why we keep referring to Kenny G. He's Kenny in Generation Gamma, and Kenny G sounded as good a name to call him as anything else. So that's going to be it for this week. Don't forget, if you think we completely missed the point here and how we're explaining this current moment, for example, the rifleman example we gave, if you think we're completely missing the boat there, we'd love for you to explain to Kenny G your perspective, where you think we're getting it wrong. Tell him what you think we got right or what you think we got wrong. You go to unsilentpodcast.com, jump onto our Rumble channel, and you can comment on the videos there as well. But go to unsilentpodcast.com and it'll show you where to find all these things so you can put your 2 cents in and make sure Kenny G understands your perspective. And again, where Dave and I got it right and where we got it wrong. And with that, that's it for this week. And we will see you all next week.
Do
you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.